Hello everyone, so today I'm gonna be doing chapter 9, which is the theories of effect of media on our society. Okay, so how do we keep up on news about what is going on in our neighborhood, our city, our states, our nation, or even around the world? Well, we have technology. With the involvement of our technologies today, we're able to keep up and to catch up on the newest information around the world outside of our countries and our nations because we have different media platforms to help us to do that. For instance, I'm in Asia right now, but I'm able to be aware what's happening in the US or maybe even further in Europe. Okay, so the very first series that I'm going to introduce to you is the agenda setting for this chapter. So it's basically the idea that media tell people what to think about. Like they cannot, for example, they cannot tell you what to think about because they're not that powerful. It depends on us as readers, as the one who's consuming this media platform, but we are easily influenced by them and they can easily be dominant in our society. For example, during the election season, the certain types of media platforms they might use the strategy to try to draw more attentions for potential voters for certain candidates. Like this is exactly what the media in my country, because we just had the presidential election last year, and this is the best example for using this strategy for them using this strategy to try to give more coverage for certain parties and certain candidates because for this types of media in my country we usually call them like they are representing for certain parties and certain candidates. So even it's not during the election season, they still put more coverage for certain parties and certain like the congressman and the certain people for certain parties because they are basically representing that party, and they might have like a fundings or run a charity together, so they can have more relationship together and they can become really dominant for just to report the positivities for certain parties and to give them more coverage and try to use this idea to influence us as readers or audiences to what to think about and to try to use this strategy to get our attentions and to basically just to tell us what should we do or what should we not do for that. Okay, so the next one we have the priming. So this is the idea in agenda setting that media use this strategy to draw attention to some certain aspects of political life at the expense of others. So this is basically the strategy. I think especially during the election season, they use these strategies a lot because they will try to draw more attentions from potential voters and then try to use these strategies to cover more aspects for certain candidates about their political lives and at the expense of others. And here we have the implications for agenda setting. So the first one is the agenda building. I think it is very amazing to see that they have this steps for agenda setting because I don't necessarily think that this is only about negativities because they can also be positive by using the right way and using the to implement these ideas as positivities and to try to bring more positivities in our society. So here we have the agenda building is a collective process in which media or government try to influence one another in areas of public policy. So they might be using this for representing or to displaying their platforms during the election season. And then the second one is the framing theory. It's the idea that people use sets of expectation to make sense of their social world, and media contribute to those expectations. So they can sometimes the different candidates or celebrities, they can try to use these theories to make their expectation to make sense and to convey this expectational idea to their readers and to their followers, to their audiences. And then we have the second order agenda setting. So it's the idea that media set the public's agenda as a second level or order. So they might be able to use this idea to try to classify the public's agendas and to switch the order for agenda setting. So then we have the hierarchy of effects model. So this is basically like the idea that practical theory calling for the differentiations of persuasive effects related to time and effort necessary for their accomplishment. So they might try to use this to make their accomplishments or what they have been doing for the society to be more persuasive, or those people who follow them or who simply just vote for them, and they can get more to try to draw more attentions from potential voters. And then the last one we have the CAP sequence. It's the persuasion model. So it's basically the strategy that they try to use to make their information being published more effectively and more persuasively. Okay, so here we have the spiral of science. It's the idea that people holding news contrary to those dominant in the media are moved to keep those views to themselves for fear and rejection. So it's basically, for example, that people might try to, like reporters or the different media platform producers, they might take this idea to hold views and contrary to those like dominant in that certain media aspect, and they can keep the views to themselves without showing not too much of fear or rejections. So basically they can use this to try to show that they can be more persuasive, and they can also be more reputational. Reporting on presenting informations to us as readers or audiences. And then the Newman has states that simply that the media, especially television, adopt a prevailing attitude in any controversy as a matter of course, and as a result, they present a dominant tendency. So we really have to be more selective without being dominated by or being manipulated by media, because we have to come up with our different ideas and to think critically on the information that we are receiving every single day. And here we have this research, the news production research. It's the study of how the institutional routines of news production inevitably produce distorted or biased content. So this is the research that show that there might be some potential stereotypical content or biasotypical, we can simply say that, from different media platforms and from consuming different mass media communication. So we really have to be more selective and really have to pay more attention without being manipulated or being influenced directly just by the information that we receive. We really have to have our insights and our thoughts toward the information that we are receiving, because for example they might use, like for my experiences, I've seen some media coverage, they try to use the facial features of Asian people like myself as a symbol of people like us being cheap and being sometimes being vicious to the people around us, but that is just not true. It's a really biased and stereotypical content for that, so we really have to pay more attention on that. And then here we have the objectivity ritual by Gail Touchman. So it's basically like in news production research, the term for professional practice designed to ensure objectivities. They are implicit, biased towards support of the status quo. So it's the research that for professional practices, and then designed to just to ensure that we can stay our neutralities over this bias or stereotypical contents, which I just mentioned that. And I've seen some people that they're talking about this for, we have to be on neutral and we have to be more careful on telling the story without being too biased or stereotypical, which I think is a very good idea for Gail Touchman to point out of this neutral idea, because it really helps us to change the way that we're thinking about directly. Sometimes we just think directly the information that we're receiving from this media platforms that they're right, but sometimes they're just not. So we really have to be more objective, and we got to have the objectivities, and we have to be more stay on neutral, and just to equally think about the contents that we're receiving every single day. And then here we have another theory, is the media intrusion theory by Davis. So it's the idea that media have intruded into and taken over politics to the degree that politics have become subverted. So it's basically, for example, it can be really helpful to escalate the platforms for different candidates during the election season, which I think sometimes it can be good if that can be more persuasive, and they can be more reputational. They can create their reputations over the different distributions for media platforms, but they can also be like what it says in here, a decline in social capital, because it can directly influence to leaders to develop a reserve membership and participations in social groups, so they can have even more control over different social groups. So we really have to be careful. We have to think critically and think about the consequences, and think about the information that we're receiving. We can always, because we have, like what I said in the beginning, with the involvement of technologies today, we really can be more selective, and we can be more careful on what we're receiving every single day. We can always double check them, just Google them and search for that. And here we have another theory, is the information diffusion theory by Everett Roger. So it refers to the theory that explains how innovations are introduced and adopted by various communities. So it's theory that helps to give more explanations and how the innovations are introduced and adopted. We can kind of understand why certain types of explanations or innovations, they can be easily accepted by various communities, and this theory try to point out that we can be more understandable, acknowledgeable about how this different explanation from different media platforms can be more adopted. And then a social marketing theory. So for this theory, it's basically the collections of middle range theories and concerning the promotion of socially valuable information. So it has many different features, and I have put it on in here so you can take a look at that. So basically it's the idea that they can we can see the media try to promote more valuable information and more useful and more understandable and more for example, like the medical cases on the newspaper, or like something that talks about, I don't know, for me, I think the information that I receive, or maybe that I watched over the news, different media news platforms, and they are talking about how to improve our health and how to live longer with a better medical condition. I think that's the valuable information for me, and it can be used under this social marketing theory, so they can try to catch more attentions from their readers and audiences by appealing them with the information that they want to know. Like, what I want to know is about the health, how to improving my medical situation, my medical condition, and also my health and my family's health. So they can maybe put more pieces over the topic about how to improving your health and how to maybe provide a new way to how do we take our vitamins and how do we implement these healthy ideas into our lives. So they can try to propose more valuable information to us. Okay, now here we have another theory, the media system dependency theory. So it's the idea that the more a person depends on having needs and gratified by media use. So it's the idea that media can be dominant and can be part of our lives. So we really have to think about how we can be influenced. So sometimes maybe even more extreme, like to be manipulated by the media, because they can just easily and just like get into your life unconsciously because you watch them every single day and you were influenced by them. So it's the idea that telling like we are more like the media system is dependent, and it's dependent on what we think about and what we want to know, what we want to hear. And if we want to catch this, like if you want to know about like the cosmetology topics, or if you want to know more about the politics, political topics, that you would get into those media platforms that cover a lot of things about that. So they can be really dependent to our lives, and they can sometimes even they can influence our media wills to have and to influence our lives ultimately. So here we have another idea, is the knowledge gap. It's a systematical differences in knowledge between better informed and less informed segment of a population. So I think this idea, it really helps to distinguish the better informed and the less informed segments of a population. So we can try to know what's the better informed and what's the less informed resources that we want to know and what we don't want to know. So here we have an analysis, is the cultivation analysis. It's a theory that television cultivates or creates a worldview that, although possibly inaccurate, becomes a reality because people believe it to do so. So this is what I'm saying like earlier. This information that we are receiving every single day, they might be inaccurate, but they can easily become reality because we believe it, and we believe this is true, even though it is not, but we believe it eventually. So we really have to be more picking on what type of information that we're receiving. We always can think critically about the information that we are receiving, acquiring from the media. And then here we have another analysis. It's the products of the cultivation analysis. It's the message system analysis and cultivation analysis. So it can, for example, it can give more detailed content of television programming and allow us to access the recurring and consistent presentations of images, things, values, and materials. So they can even create more coverage, different presentations. And here we have an idea of the second order cultivation effect. So it's the attitude and beliefs that they are formed as a result of viewers' probability judgments. So it's basically like the belief for our probability of judgments. So they have this effects for to know like what we were judged about and what are the probability of our judgments. So like what I say, always like we really have to be more. I think we have to be more judgmental and we have to think critically, for sure. And then here we have the media literacy. So it's the ability to access and to analyze, to evaluate and communicate messages. So it allows us as readers and audiences to be able to deepen our ideas for different media coverages and to access, to analyze, evaluate, and to communicate messages eventually. And then there are two views of media literacy. So the first one is basically it is the media impact on the individual and society. So they can have more ideas about how I'm thinking about and how the society is thinking about. And it's the understanding and they can process of mass communication. And it's also the development of strategies with which to analyze and discuss media messages. So it's like a progress for using this strategy to analyze and to discuss about different media messages, and also an awareness of media content as a text. So by using this analysis, they can have even more ideas and they can have more insights about how the awareness of the impact of the media on the individual and the society, from the small to the big groups of people. And then here we have another one, is the two views of media literacy. So it's basically the media literacy is continuum and not a category. And they needs to be motivated. They need to be developed because they're multi-dimensional. And the purpose for this is to give us more control over interpretations. So we can come up with more different insights and interpretations about the information that we're receiving every single day, and we can have more ideas about them. Okay, so here's the summary. So it really is that this chapter really tells us that media does have a great impact and effect for our lives and for the society. So what we are choosing and what we are thinking about receiving or watching different media platforms, we have to be really careful and we have to be more knowledgeable and to acknowledge, to be able to distinguish the false information and the right information. And we can always come up with more judgments and to think critically what we're receiving every single day, and to try not to be easily manipulated by them, by thinking critically and by being judgmental for filtering this information that we're receiving. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation, and thank you. And here I have two questions I want you to think about and then put on the answer about for this question. So, do you think that there are gender difference on media coverage? Can one gender actually take lead in media today? So you can give some examples about why you support this idea or why not you don't support this idea. And then the second question is, has the involvement of technologists today alter your willingness to speak or remain silent? So like what I say in the beginning of the presentation, with the involvement of technologists that we are able to keep up with the newest information. So do you think this involvement actually helps you to alter your willingness to speak out and to be more outspoken, or you basically just remain silent? And you can think about and then answer the question, and thank you.